Julia with Sirius Taurus Moon Venus Hour Mercury Day. And the ascendant is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is conjoining from out and Venus is exalted in Pisces. The moon is 13 degrees Sag, ruled by retrograde Jupiter, here in the second house, middle decan of Cancer. Well, the topic I want to talk about with Venus being exalted in Cancer is a good time to talk about the eurekas regarding beliefs around Venusian things. And we are 2 meters before Valentine's Day. The Valentine jab has already launched. So so I'm peaceful and quiet. Just prepared for the eclipse to eclipse. Sun is 22 in Aquarius. But other than that, yeah. Well, one of the things that I see that is a complete death trap, and I'm going to talk about people who are interested in women because that's kind of like what I understand the most about. And what I see as a death trap, both from a person attended to political assassination prevention, um, from person that tended to the darker topics that what's out there about the Epstein files is not even the tip of the iceberg, um, and it's still on. Okay, it's not something. It's not a has been. Um, as a person who, um, when I was giving consultation, it was mainly relational astrology and possible challenges to relationships. So bringing all of those things together and saying, how am I going to talk about it without talking about the doom and gloom? How am I going to give a benefic message of true cohesion, of union, of love, um, without being without ruining the party? I mean, definitely politically it's going to ruin the party, but yes, and the truth is, if people are indeed even thinking about dating, very risky in this economy, but but let's say that they're even thinking about those things. A lot of people are concerned about a honey trap, which basically is a trafficked person. Um, for the ladies, it's lover boy, and meeting. The number one thing I have to say about it is, first of all, embodiment and secure attachment. Um, what are the needs that we're seeking to meet in our lives? What are the relational needs that we have? The more aware we are of those things, first of all, and I'm talking about in kind of like, I wish I could say normal life, because it's not a single day we don't hear another story of somebody being trafficked or some content creator being missing or trafficked and so on. Yeah, they can kidnap they can literally kidnap a politician and say that this is for their best good, and, and he'll just have to roll with it. Um, and those that didn't roll with it, sometimes. Um, but other than that, Not knowing this, first of all, embodiment. If there's something blocking embodiment, I'm not even talking about the cases ritual abuse, people feel not in their body, um, uh, uh, technology, and so on and so forth. I talk about these things in other videos. But if somebody's sense of self and embodiment is not there, first of all, they can't claim cheating. I mean, if you're not there with yourself, how can anybody be? And if something's keeping you from being there with yourself, whether it's the sense of self, sense of embodiment, then that's the first thing to tackle. Secondly, uh, those what do men or women are looking for, the videos that try to sell you trauma bond, get acquainted with attachment patterns. Trauma bond is Epstein files. They can't say it. Okay, when you go to a therapist, the therapist can only give you so far if they're not tortured. They can't. Because what happens? Because if you actually heal, what happens? You're gonna remember things. So basically, a concept that you really need to get to know is secure attachment. Secure attachment is the antithetical to trauma bond. Anxious attachment. These are all study cases of various degrees of how the Epstein files affected your upbringing. Very simply put. Okay? The wing of the monarch butterfly from MK Ultra. But on the day-to-day basis, those are concepts that, so embodiment and secure attachment. Sovereignty. Your life energy is yours. Your and your Missy life energy. Okay, you're on the perspective part of life energy. That's your home. That's your housing. If you want to grow a family, so sexual energy, not there to be siphoned and not to siphon. Now this strikes a chord because in many cases men are more visual, and this is where one has to find a way with themselves to be embodied. I live in Israel. A lot of the things I hear is that the Israeli Mossad is so effective because they have honey traps. It's basically human trafficking. They force people to be religious, then they traffic them, then they put on masquerade of this, masquerade of that. The person is mind controlled. Israel did not invent that. In fact, Elijah talks about it, that the USSR used her as a spy, and her father called her whore. All those very, very dark things. Now, why am I telling you all those very, very dark things? Because that is where they get you. They get you by trauma. They get you by energy siphoning. And if they manage to convince you to have a mindset that's even approximate to the mindset of a rapist, they won. They won your life. They won your capacity to make money, wealth, real estate, support your family, children. Now They have a control over it, and they put everything, all the material resources that are your energy, as something to blackmail you so that you'll have to do crime to get. If they get you to think like a rapist, now what is to think like a rapist? Anything that doesn't align with the sense of self, secure attachment, and relaxed arousal. I don't care what your kink is, as long as it's safe, sane, and consensual. There's Evie Lupine for the kinky people. She's a great content creator. Vanilla shaming, rapist mindset. The vanilla people, they try to get by applying to the approximate of embodiment and then siphon the energy. And then you have to remember, love has to be actually loving. For the kinky people, they are already dispositioned because kink is power exchange. So there's already disposition to handler. There are a lot of kinks that are completely the emulation of human trafficking. Now, I'm not here, I don't believe in kink shaming. But being aware of that. Because if they get you to act like a handler, you're theirs. There are people that are trafficked and there are people that murder the handlers. And many hats to those programmings. But when you ground it, when you don't seek the guy that's been, I'm sorry, like an Epstein with all these girls and those girls and those girls, all of them raped, tortured, trafficked, then he rapes them, comes on dopamine, no erectile this, you don't even know what's. Then they have this money, that money, bullshit, they're all in debt. Till the money line, boom, Epstein files. In the meantime, 7th of October, genocide in Gaza, ICE. Yeah. So be very cautious. If you have a power exchange kink, be extremely cautious. The handler has a handler. And if the kink is even reminding of, you gotta be super embodied, super conscious. Again, watch Evie Lupine. For the vanilla people, they usually apply for the approximate of embodiment, and then they try to siphon the energy. It's more difficult for them because the more embodied you are, the more they have to emulate secure attachment. And you get there by holding them accountable. The love has to be actually loving. You don't blame, you don't shame, you don't this, you don't that. Love has to be actually loving. Now you're gonna get to the money line, because if any energy has been siphoned from you, even as an infant, it's gonna begin to show. Because when you walk out, if a relationship, you have a communication, let's say you talk with a woman, it begins to be a little bit confusing. You're out. Now they can't get you. If there's any place that you've been hurt, heartbroken, cheated on, betrayed, I don't know, go to the topic of secure attachment and see what was missing. Because this is where you guys fell together and apart. If you don't have embodiment and secure attachment, you could be falling for ladies, and astrologically I see it as the moon of the lady comes before your moon. Okay? You need a little bit of TLC, and sometimes she could be more like the caregiver than the Missy. And that's okay, as long as both of you are aware on time, because then what happens, she's going to provide. A lot of Pisces Venuses have this problem. She's going to provide, hold you in this warm embrace. You're going to receive, not siphon, not anything. And then you're going to meet a girl that has her moon before. If you're otherwise compatible, if your moon comes after her moon, you're going to be interested in her. Your energy is going to go to her, even though you might not make a move. Now, if she sees that, she will be naturally responsive to you, particularly if she has worked on reconnecting with her feminine. She would feel that is some, and now since that thing was missing like water, boom. Now, the lady that probably still needs to recover from her own sexual trauma, there was a coping mechanism for her to take care of a man. Okay? Now what happens to that lady? She's heartbroken. Now, what happens if the lady meets a man? Okay, if the lady caretakes for a man, but meanwhile reconnects with the feminine energy and so on and so forth, and then the moons behind her begin to show up in her life. He's responsive for that. Okay, now what you gonna say? She a cheat? No, you guys, to begin with, fell in love on the basis that you needed someone to take care of you, and that was basically met, but in a way that both of you had something to do with the relational, maybe sexual, maybe not, needs that need to be met. I, for example, walked 3.5 decades on the face of Earth, not really aware that I need a hug. Okay? There were the moons that are behind me began to show up in my life. It was sudden, so much so I didn't even know who that person is. He being used and so on and so forth. I had to see what's to that. Well, there's some sort of a personality calling affects the sexuality. So that's a really deep issue. But for other people, the issue might not be that deep, but it's on the thread of that. And then people get heartbroken, believe that they are not worthy over nothing, believe that they are not sexy over nothing, get too fat or too skinny for what is healthy for them, just because there are things that are still not aligning. And another thing is, I see a lot of people trying to warn, don't date a single mom, don't date a this. Now, I'm not here to interfere in your man-to-man advice. I get you're the people dating them. You know what you're talking about, and you're the people that had these bad experiences. If women don't have women rights, how can they relax and be orgasmic? How can they be in secure attachment with a man? And here is the thing, because a honey trap sets a honey trap on these things. The point of a honey trap is economic hitmanship. To get people addicted. Okay, it's an economy of slavery and addiction. That's, I talk in another context about the fact that only embodied connection, honoring the sensual boundaries, the non-erotic boundaries, only that yields psychic awareness and truth cohesion in intelligence, has big importance in national and international security. The rest of the stuff is just looting, and it drops. It's a bubble, and that bubble pops. We're actually scheduled to have a bubble pop with Saturn Neptune. But from the individual point of view, you're dating somebody, you're swiping under the rug, that patient sovereignty is an idea that is not even respected, that you may be having passive income from investments in weapons that target civilians to dehouse them. It's the same laser. Patents. Okay? That could be the 8th house, that could be the 12th house. The things you're swiping under the rug. A thriving relationship has a context. Now, here is the thing. The more heartbroken, thirsty, and desperate they get you, then they get you. People survived the death camps when they basically had the connection with one another. And nobody teaches that at school. And I'll tell you even more than that. You go to a therapist, you ask to align yourself with secure attachment as the goal of the therapy. They got to try to Epstein you. I'm speaking from experience. There are many campaigns right now. And of course, just like I would tell women to be discerning around the so-called sisterhood, again, not nihilistic, but discerning.
יגעת ומצאת. זה שלי.
Oh, amazing. And okay, secure attachment is not just about romance, it's also about friendships who had 2 meters before the eclipse. Okay, the people that you'll see mostly on the Epstein files, either they were born into these cults, or since infants they were somehow targeted, maybe through the family, maybe. Um, but don't be fooled that this context doesn't affect the ability to have a thriving relationship. There can only be love in zero slavery society. Okay? Even the topics of sexual violence doesn't just happen against women. It happens against children, boys and girls. The boys don't suffer less from violence where when they get older, they just become one with the perpetrator and harm others. And also the women are required to do the same if they stay in these circles. Um, and but knowing, even knowing why something is delaying or why something is in this current situation, okay, it seems unattainable, but the world is changing. When a handler falls down, it takes an entire tribe down, because that tribe was based on treason. Also, when there aren't the lists. Okay, the minute something like that happens, people begin to try to dissociate from, depending on how smug they are, but um, and it's also the signaling. When was the Epstein file exposed? In 2008. What happens adjacent? It was litigated 2006, supposedly died 2008. What else happened in 2008? The subprime crisis. Now it's being mentioned again, Saturn, Neptune, and 0 degree Aries. For those who are non-astrologer, it's think about the fall of the USSR and the in-between economy. Yes, we had Aries there during the Great Depression, where Saturn and Neptune meet this year. Okay, um, so what happens to the children if you go by the programs of the government and poop children? Then, yeah, again, people that are born in these circles, but I'm talking about what we see on the media today, because I think there are hardly any voices that, if you watch women content, it's usually decentering men. If you watch male content, either they're married with children and their advices are good, but they're already married with children, or they share their bad experiences, which is important, or the red flag situations, um, which is important content, or they promise, or they are rage baiting you. Just like there's a lot of business advice out there. Nobody tells you that when you get to the threshold that they want you to either mingle with the Epstein or get lost from the business sector. Nobody talks about that threshold. I'm the only person I know that talked about that threshold. And I wasn't even an LLC. They catch it before LLC. So just like when people are starting businesses and entrepreneurship, there's some great business advice out there, but nobody talks about that threshold, and that's the grand missing. And I mean, you can't require the 30 under 30 Forbes to be able to speak, especially not when they're after already one heart attack from being at their 20s from being a hustler. And just just the same as nobody talks about that, nobody talks about with you about the threshold where I know it from connecting to my femininity, embodied, honoring my inner child, and so on and so forth. Then the satanic panic all up in the astral, and um, okay, they usually catch people when they level up, and by the time you get what's happening, you're like, it's a, yeah. But here is the thing: a lot of people are leveling up. A lot of people are connecting with a healthy form of masculinity, honoring their inner feminine, um, understanding that the yes, no, and maybe being sacred around sexuality and not is not just for one sex or gender. And then the looters. Why? Because you're becoming a fertile man. You're becoming a man that's about to tap in to his financial freedom. You're becoming a man that's about to tap in to getting out of the lodges. If you okay, or to tap in to where they would prefer to loot what you have to the lodges. If there's anybody around you that's supporting your tapped in persona, okay, and let's say they have good friends, they'll try to they try to sever ties or try to see if they can get that connection to go bad. Why? Because your life energy is miracles, is your life energy is also, think about it, if you speak in terms of chakras, um, in terms of chakras, we talk about the Earth Star chakra. That's basically the land under your feet. Even, by the way, for women, they discovered that to grow something, or to grow a garden, or to have food sovereignty and land sovereignty is actually helping them to curate from sexual violence and even trafficking cases. Suddenly, yeah, Uranus was in Taurus. All the women that that I came across, they were recovering from really horrid things, even ritual abuse. Suddenly, they were growing a garden. And then I said, well, I also want to grow a garden. If it helps them, maybe it will help me. And then, of course, I leveled up. Um, so you might want to get familiar with the term spiritual warfare, because the funny things are not meaning you're going psychotic, but that somebody tries to put you in some trauma and confusion so that they can basically take what is the land, the resources, the opportunities, um, and have you addicted and have your wealth and energy funneled into slavery. So I know that just as there are many Epstein files, and there are many red-pilled men, and there are also people that are leveling up. We're not exposed to each other in the algorithm. Just like the people that actually talked about what the Epstein and death truths are actually about don't have a lot of reach in social media. Also, the people that are aligning with secure attachment. Okay? The algorithm, I'm not even talking date apps. I'm talking people to people. I'm not even talking dating or anything like that. But the algorithm tends to dilute so that when you open YouTube or social media or Facebook, and they'll make sure you'll do that a lot. Okay, because when you're leveling up, it's a threat to gas companies that want to traffic people. And they are themselves in threat because a competing gas company can try to blackmail them to join politics and become a visible one, not just behind the scenes. um, and this is where people get exposed to the doom and gloom or the diversion tactics, the control ops. Um, but we are in the age of Aquarius, and people know that if they look for um, lower views, they may find higher quality content. Um, so, things that are grounding. Knowing what secure attachment, being very honest with oneself, where they stand. If you tend to fall madly in love with a woman that makes you breakfast, perhaps you're missing somebody to make you breakfast. And and here's the thing, because a lot of people don't say that those needs, both men and women. Men tell you to man up. Women tell, oh man, nah, decentralized men, they're like babies. No, your inner child needs are important. It's just that it's about meeting those needs adaptively and being aware. Just like your intimate needs, okay? They're important. Again, it's about meeting those needs adaptively um, and being aware. And of course, context. The more you level up, you understand that it exposes what else was connected to. Okay, for example, there was a phase where I was taking a break from academia because of all the Epsteins there, and I had to level up with myself to think, okay, what were the things um, that I needed to heal, and so on and so forth, and that brought up the crisis in the healing professions, which later brought up the crisis in businesses, the crisis is in fertility. Okay, when I began to ask myself, wait a second, um, am I child free because I'm child free, or am I child free because I still need to heal my inner child? Am I child free because I can't afford to have babies in this economy? Okay, what can I do so that it will be my choice, not just to have the option to abort, but also to have the option to give birth. Yes, not unready. Yes, of course, tending to one's inner child is more important. People talk about the regret of not having children. Um, I am 41. I don't have children, but to have children prematurely is also something to consider. And because of traumas that people have been in, relational traumas, prematurely is not about age. So, once those contexts introduce themselves, and in astrology we usually see that right now, for example, Pluto is applying to square my Venus. So, of course, there is a crisis around the topic of relations, friendship. It's in my third house, also business, um, communication. And degree 4 is relational degree, foundation, housing, and so on. Um, and you see those things that they are arriving, and as they arrive, it's about tending to them. When we understand that about a relationship, bless you, my mom sneezed, that's a tautology. When we understand that about a relationship, and we understand that about a business, okay, there are many other things, I addressed it in other episode. Relationships, why do they try to, there was a discussion about putting single women, men out there, if you feel stifled by women, um, they think to have single women in concentration camps. Like, and then what one of the most important needs, not only of men, is space. How's she gonna give you space if she's not doing something with her life? And how's she gonna do something with her life if the entire world is in trafficking mindset? Now, this may sound like, my gosh, how am I ever going to have love? I don't have a simple answer for you. Um, but if you think about love, raising awareness to what's underneath the Epstein files is love. Raising awareness to the conditions that need to be politically, socially, economically to have a thriving relationship is love. All these acts of love are on the frequency of love. They're also good to regulate the nervous system. They're also good to build and sustain foundation. Standing for a love that is actually loving is love. Whatever it is for you. Understanding that if you've been, how should I say that? If you've been in a place that's not quite there, and you built something that had its beautiful things and pros and cons, then sooner or later you're gonna have to address what needs to be addressed. Maybe that leads to separation. Maybe that leads to commitment. Okay, I don't know what the situation, but this is what I have to say. That you know, the reality is not so fluffy. And if you think, oh, I'm going to give up on success, I'm going to give up on love, I'm going to give up on, then what happens next? You know, you become addicted to something, and then they try to get you on that thing. Because spiritual welfare is both challenging us to grow in a place where we've been slacking. Okay, when COVID arrived, I was in lockdown twice in a student apartment. I said, what do I need more than that? That was when the war came about. Okay, whether it's PTSD or spiritual warfare, wake up in the middle of the night, shouting, sometimes from a dream. I thought I recovered. Then I tell my mother. Then I said, I think I was talking about I recovered, and so on. My mama tells me, Shirley, if you are screaming at night, should I wake you up? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And of course, I became aware that the architecture should sustain. Now, here's the thing, the entire trauma also had to do with people needing enough space. I don't know what cloning projects they have there or how they keep with the children and so on. So definitely I had to tend to that topic. As astrology, we see it as outer planets to inner planets aspect, where society meets your own personal relationships, for example. Um, but those things are also important to stay centered in turbulent times. Because, yes, it's fantastic to have a relationship or a friendship that sustains through difficulties. Amazing. But even if you don't have that right now, then those are things that I hope can provide more grounding and being centered in the face of the quite turbulent times. Yes, the world can look like one is building and building and working and building and working and doesn't see a sustaining foundation in the way that they were perceiving that to be. But if you look closer, you will see that you are you are way more yourself, even within all of those weird things. And um, and you also understand that there are certain things happening in the world which relieves you from relieves a little bit of the burden and of having to prove yourself to yourself. And this is where and it's not about giving up on oneself or not at all, the other way around, because when you relieve some of that burden, when you correctly discern what are these timelines that try to enslave people and plagiarize their energy and their labor, then you can correctly assess, hey, that timeline is there. Hey, that's the thing. Hey, that's the thing that deteriorating, let's say, my fitness, or there are literally death and concentration camps in the world right now. Sometimes it's not about fear of success, but actually addressing, is success being a part of an Epstein ring? Not to the target of this video, not to the target audience of this video. To other people, Yes, I'm not in charge of other people. And I said it, why? Because secure attachment doesn't go with those. Okay? Neither does relaxed arousal, of course. They rape there, they don't have sex. They do program people to have misplaced arousal, and they get an approximation with the shit ton of drugs. And in particular, operations that they can apply. Um, but those guys up there, the guys and girls, they're not. It's very weird. And they like to control one another's behavior and sexuality. Um, they like to, because it's a mind control, so of course it affects the sexuality. And there are instances that it's really funny to watch, but they know what's behind that, and it's absolutely not funny. Okay, even when both people have the ability to give commands to one another and so on. Again, if people enjoy those type of settings, I'm not talking about King Folk, I'm talking about okay, what they later blame Mossadegh. So, and usually the people that live this lifestyle were brought into that by torture. And more things to say. Yeah, if you are, a lot of people can still get into the traps around when they actually take responsibility over their life and want to, let's say, heal themselves. I nearly got Epstein when I tried to do that. So, well, I mean, I also wrote a satire about the cult, which is we were the symbol. I didn't know it's also the symbol of the IDF. Okay, so ik maak probleem, but uh, but granted that your life is not like mine. Although I wouldn't necessarily count on that. I do have Uranus in the 10th house with a ruler in the 11th. So you never know. but this is um, but this is really um, how should I say that? Knowing the reality of things can also lift the burden, because and it can prevent one from um, you know those traps. And yes, therapy can be wonderful, okay, but um, but patient sovereignty is important. And the trick about relational trauma is that people usually don't come to therapy when they are in increased awareness around particularly relational issues and intimate issues. Um, so yes, there are handlers in therapy. I'm not going to talk about it. I talked about the structure of extortion cults in other videos. So I'm not saying don't seek therapy. I'm not saying don't go to therapy. I'm just saying know what